Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin our discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis. The idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start the discussion, I have a very important announcement. To simplify your current affairs preparation, we are presenting monthly current affairs initiative on our YouTube channel. Every weekend on Saturday and Sunday from 6 p.m. onwards, we will be taking up subject-based revision of monthly current affairs. So today, this initiative will be launched on YouTube by Mukesh sir, who will be starting with the current affairs of last month from the subject of environment and ecology. So please ensure you attend this session live today at 6 p.m. Tomorrow, Abhishek sir will be taking a session on art and culture current affairs, which have been in the news over the past 1 month. So do subscribe to our channel and ensure that you check out these live streams which have been set up and ensure you attend these classes live at 6 p.m. as this would be the easiest way for you to prepare for your current affairs and revise the current affairs of the last 1 month. And if you want the PDF of today's class, please scan the QR code on your screen and join my Telegram channel, because after the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. So let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper and look at the first article. We have a very important editorial on page number 8 that deals with the topic of electoral reforms. See, yesterday, the leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, Rahul Gandhi, caused a massive stir across the country by bringing up some serious allegations against the Election Commission of India. Rahul Gandhi has raised some very valid questions with some documents to prove that there has been some sort of electoral irregularities which has been noticed in the election process. Now see, this might be dismissed as pure political accusation as well. But if you look at some of the documents that were presented, some of the evidence that was brought out by the Congress party while raising these allegations, though they are not substantiated, though they are not 100% verified proof that electoral fraud has been committed, at least it raises critical questions regarding the integrity and sanctity of the electoral process in the country. That is something you cannot ignore, because that is the job of the opposition. The political opposition is supposed to be the critical voice, raising key questions, and especially with regard to our electoral process and the integrity of the election commission itself. So, of course, the leader of opposition alleged that there might be a possible collusion as well between the ruling party and the election commission. Maybe this allegation might be too far-fetched as there is no substantiating proof, but at least the fact is there are certain questionable problems which are present in the electoral system and the process. And this is what we need to look at. Because in a democracy, the very foundation of a democratic state is built on the conduct of free and fair elections. And under the Indian Constitution, this sacred responsibility has been vested with a constitutional body, the Election Commission of India, under Article 324. So the Election Commission of India has a sacred constitutional duty to protect the sanctity of the elections, ensure the integrity of the entire process, and it should retain the public confidence as well. The public should have the faith, the voters should have that confidence in the Election Commission that the process is transparent, the process is maintaining its integrity and sanctity. Because if you look at the allegations that were brought up by the Congress party and the leader of the opposition, there are specific instances of anomalies that have been spotted in the electoral list. This press conference that was held the other day in Bengaluru. It mainly focused on one assembly segment, the Mahadevpura assembly segment, which is part of Bangalore Central Lok Sabha constituency. And the data that was presented by Rahul Gandhi was specific to last year's Lok Sabha elections. So, according to the research carried out by the Congress party, in 2024 Lok Sabha elections in this particular constituency, especially within the Mahadevpura assembly segment, some very serious irregularities were noticed. And I would like to bring them out, mention what irregularities were spotted. That is something you can't really ignore. Maybe there isn't enough proof to allege that there is some sort of malified intention on part of the election commission and some sort of collusion between ruling party and the election commission. Maybe to prove that, enough proof may not be available, but at least the irregularities are very stark, very evident, and it's in your face. Now, if you look at the Mahadevpura assembly segment, the leader of opposition has clearly pointed out that there are several duplicate voters in the same constituency, thousands of them. Now, you might point out that this is nothing new. In many constituencies, there are duplicate voter names. Same voters would be registered multiple times within the same constituency. This happens even because of change of residence as well. Whenever people shift their place of residence, get the documents updated, they might be listed on the electoral roll at multiple polling booths within the same constituency. Or there are cases where voters are registered across multiple constituencies. Now, this is already a persisting problem which the Election Commission is trying to solve. Now, take for example, the special intensive revision exercise in Bihar, which has also generated a lot of controversy. But that exercise is necessary. Maybe the criticism in the Bihar Sir exercise was with regard to the manner in which the exercise was being carried out, the hurried manner in which it was being done. But such a revision of electoral list is necessary, and it is one of the core mandate of the Election Commission under the Representation of People Act. Filtering out duplicate names is absolutely necessary to maintain the sanctity of the process, to ensure the principle of one person, one vote, which is sacrosanct in a democratic setup. Now, it's not just the problem of duplicate voters. There are other serious irregularities that have been noticed in the Mahadevpura assembly segment. For example, several addresses that were listed on the electoral roll where voters were registered, they were found to be invalid or even fake at times. If you look at the documents that were presented, which has been taken from the Election Commission of India's website, and based on other documents shared by the Election Commission during and after the elections, the Congress party has brought out these gross irregularities. You will notice that some of the addresses are absolutely fake. There have been many instances where in commercial buildings, hundreds of voters are registered. In one small house, which is a one-bedroom apartment, there are more than 50 voters registered. So how is it possible? So this could be a clear case of negligence, incompetence, which has crept into the electoral process, leading to these irregularities in the voters list. Or worst case, as the Congress party is alleging, there is some sort of malified intention. Now, without proof, of course, you can't justify what could be the actual case, but it is for the Election Commission of India to clarify, to be transparent, to review and introspect its own processes. But instead, the Election Commission has become defensive. The Election Commission has said that Rahul Gandhi should come on oath and then provide evidentiary proof, and only then we will look into these allegations. Reportedly, the Election Commission website also went down yesterday, raising even more controversies that maybe it has been done deliberately to prevent media and other experts from accessing key documents, who would now be looking to verify the claims made by Rahul Gandhi and the Congress party. Of course, you can't go just by the claims being made by one opposition party, but the very fact that prima facie, on the face of it, there appears to be clear irregularities in the voters list. if it is the case in one assembly segment, imagine what could be the case across constituencies across the country. There have been cases where multiple voters are registered in a single address. As I said, in a small house, 50, 60 voters are registered, and they're all active voters, and even votes have been cast in their name. What is even more disturbing is that on the voters list, those who are registered for several voter identities, there are no photographs. Some photographs are not clearly legible, not visible clearly. Or for hundreds of voters, the photographs are completely missing. And it has been noted, based on the polling booth data, which is shared by the Election Commission with the party booth workers later, it is clear that same registered voters have cast multiple votes in the same polling booth. There has also been a noted case of misuse of Form 6. Form 6 is used to enroll new electors into the list. And the opposition party has pointed out that there is a smoking gun. There is prima facie evidence to show that deliberate additions have been done at the last minute, probably try and swing the elections. Now, if you look at the results in Bangalore Central constituency in the last Lok Sabha election, particularly the voting trends in Mahadevpura assembly segment, there appears to be a very slight margin that the BJP gained over Congress and the other parties. But of course, this alone is not proof. I'm clearly saying this is not alone proof to indicate any malified intention or a deliberate fraud involving the ruling party and the Election Commission. That is too far-fetched. It is unjustified to make such claims as well. But the questions being raised by the leader of opposition is absolutely valid. There are prima facie cases visible on the face of it that irregularities are present in the voters list. Not one or two, not few cases, but hundreds and thousands of cases. So when such allegations are brought up, the Election Commission of India has a duty. It is duty bound by the Constitution to maintain its transparency, uphold its integrity, and at any cost, it should be protecting the sanctity of the electoral process. Instead of getting defensive and blindly denying the allegations or making statements which appears to sidestep the actual issue which has been brought up, the Election Commission should actually be open to constructive criticism. Because that is the job of the opposition. That is the job of the media, the civil society, the citizens in general in a democracy. When such criticism is present, it is healthy for a democracy. It helps strengthen our democratic institutions, particularly constitutional bodies such as the Election Commission of India. But instead, the defensive approach of Election Commission to outright deny all the allegations and try and place unnecessary hurdles is it's further casting shadow over the transparency and the integrity of the body itself. And this could affect public confidence. I mean, you can already see on social media as to how a negative sentiment has already been generated following this press conference by Rahul Gandhi against the Election Commission of India, which is natural. I was going through the X platform, lot of posts pointing out these irregularities, expressing complete disbelief and shock, and that highlights the lack of voter confidence which is creeping in, and that is never good for a democratic setup. The Election Commission should not only be transparent, maintain its integrity, but it should be proving that as well in front of the public. In the public's eye, it should be seen as an incorruptible body. It should be seen as the most competent democratic institution. This image of the Election Commission is absolutely critical. And not just the image, but in action as well. Election Commission should be forthcoming to introspect its own work. There is no shame in admitting that errors have happened or irregularities have crept in. That is why the SIR exercise is primarily carried out, the special intensive revision of the voters list is necessary for that purpose, as we have seen recently in the state of Bihar. But of course, the Bihar SIR exercise has raised more questions. That's a slightly different matter altogether. Because the allegation is the Bihar Sir exercise was rushed through. It was done in a hurried manner just before the upcoming assembly election in Bihar. Lakhs of voters have been dropped from the list, and apparently there are cases coming up where legitimate voters have been dropped. You also see some inconsistencies where women voters have been removed in larger numbers compared to men. Now, this doesn't sit right with the established trends because Bihar, being a state which has contributed to out migration, generally migrant workers would be primarily men moving out of states like Bihar to other states for employment. So, if the drop was in male voters, that would have been seen as logical. But you will see a clear discrepancy here where the number of women voters who are dropped from the list is higher compared to the men voters. So experts are pointing out this could be because the illiteracy levels amongst females in Bihar is very high. The illiteracy rate amongst women in the age of 15 to 49 is at 55%, which is one of the highest in the country. So maybe women voters were not aware of the SIR exercise, or they didn't know what documents to submit. They didn't know how to get the process done. And as a result, maybe more women voters have been left out. And this again would be a disservice in a democratic setup. The Election Commission has a sacred duty to ensure complete inclusion, ensure all eligible voters are added to the list and only ineligible voters are removed from the list, and the list has to be sanitized. Such an exercise, which calls for intensive revision of electoral roll, is necessary, but how it is done, the manner, the process which is employed, is also equally important. So these are the key questions in front of the Election Commission right now. And Election Commission honestly has to provide a clear answer to the voters. It's not about which party. See, even for our exams, we never care about the political affiliation, be it the Congress, the BJP, or any party, doesn't matter to us. It's about maintaining the sanctity of the process. If these valid questions are being raised, this should be treated as constructive criticism, and the Election Commission has to come forward and try to set the record straight. Let's say Election Commission has proof to establish that these irregularities did not happen. Then let it bring that out and let it clarify that transparency is what is necessary. The willingness to address these concerns is what is needed. But unfortunately, it appears that Election Commission is going on the defensive and it's trying to defend these allegations, saying nothing has gone wrong, and it's trying to pass the blame. And that raises even more doubts, unnecessary suspicion. That's where the rumors and conspiracy theories come up that elections are being rigged in the country. There are questions about the EVMs, VVPAT machines, the way in which VVPAT audit trail is carried out. Though Election Commission has repeatedly clarified to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has been assured beyond reasonable doubt that EVMs are not tamperable, or it is essentially tamper proof. It can't be tampered with. Election Commission has also justified in front of the Supreme Court with regard to the current audit trail which is done for VVPAT, the paper or audit trail. But there can be better processes implemented, more transparent outreach from the Election Commission to establish the integrity of the EVM machines and the VVPAT audit trail. Maybe expansion of the VVPAT audit trail to more constituencies and more polling booths to ensure we cross check and cross match the paper audit trail with the actual electronic votes that are registered. These steps are absolutely necessary and it calls for significant electoral reforms, especially when it comes to maintaining and updating the voters list and doing away with these irregularities. You can't have duplicate voters. You can't have fake addresses, voter IDs without photographs. You can't have same epic numbers and same photographs as well. In Mahadevpura assembly segment, there have been instances where multiple voters are listed. They all have same photographs. Sometimes epic numbers are same as well. And in commercial buildings, 50, 60, 80 voters are registered. These are clear cases of irregularities which appears on the face of it, and Election Commission needs to answer these questions. So that is a very important topic which is discussed in this editorial. And take up this practice question. Let's discuss the answer writing approach as well. Because in these sessions, we focus on the critical analysis of a topic. We don't just provide you the basic facts in the newspaper articles, but we critically analyze the topic from all the perspectives, try to help you build that critical viewpoint and a balanced approach. And we also discuss the answer writing approach in every session. So let's look at the approach you can take for this question. Voter registration problems demand systemic solutions by the Election Commission of India. Critically analyze. A 250-word question for 15 marks. So for such a question, your introduction can either focus on why the sanctity of elections is important, how it is the job of the Election Commission of India to uphold the sanctity of the process. This can be a argument based on constitutional principles, based on constitutional provisions. You can start out by saying that free and fair elections is the very foundation of a democratic country. And maintaining the integrity and the sanctity of that electoral process is absolutely crucial. Ensuring the principle of one person, one vote is a key mandate which is vested with the Election Commission of India. So provide that introduction highlighting why it is important to maintain the sanctity of elections and how it is the job of the Election Commission to do that. So you're establishing what is important in elections and whose role is it to uphold the very integrity of the process. So this is one approach you can take. Or the second approach, I'll give an alternative approach if you want. Talk about the current events. A brief mention of the allegations which have come up. Now, please be careful. You don't have to write the names of political parties or take the names of politicians when you're writing mains answers, because that might appear to give a slight bias on your part. So always try to avoid showing any kind of political bias. Don't mention any political party by name. Don't mention any politicians as well. It's not needed. You can just refer to these recent incidents which have come up. For example, the questionable voter turnout in Maharashtra, in the Maharashtra Assembly elections, which also triggered a similar controversy. At the last minute, in last few months before Assembly elections, lakhs of voters were added. Of course, there has been no conclusive proof to show that it was a malified intention, but at least there is some prima facie smoking gun. On the face, something appears to be incorrect. So refer to the case from Mahadevpura Assembly segment, from the Bengaluru Central constituency. Refer to the Sir revision which has taken place in Bihar. Bring up these incidents, these allegations, pointing out that question marks have been raised about the integrity, the sanctity of the electoral process in our country. So you don't have to take any side. You don't have to say that Election Commission has been corrupted, or please don't ever say that there is a collusion between the government and the Election Commission, right? That is for the politicians to do. Leave it aside. That's not for you as civil service aspirants. Just bring up the allegations, bring up some of the questions that have been raised, and point out that these are very serious questions which can harm the image of the Election Commission. So instead of running away from the allegations and being defensive about it, it is time to face them and address them and try to ensure that the confidence of the voters is maintained and built in our electoral system. So this can also be an alternate introduction. Then in the body, you can highlight the specific problems one by one. Maybe you can list out around 5 problems which have been noticed. You can point out, for example, the duplicate voters, then multiple epic numbers, multiple cards having the same epic number, same photographs as well, fake addresses, and same epic card being used to cast multiple votes in same polling booth. Mention all these issues which have come up. The sudden jump in voter turnout in some constituencies, sudden jump in voters list right before elections. They do raise some doubts and suspicion as to how it is happening. So try to bring that out and also point out that Election Commission of India should be better presenting the data and the information. This is also a problematic area. Now, for example, when Election Commission shares the documents, especially after elections, post-electoral data is shared regarding the voter turnout and all the trends, etc. But all the data which is given, the documents, they are in image format. So it's not easy to search. There are thousands and thousands of documents which eventually come out. So for civil society, for media, for opposition groups, to research and find out any irregularities, it's not easy when documents are given in image format. It should be in text-based searchable format so that you can quickly use search-based research. Today, AI tools are also available. Of course, image-based analysis can also be done, but it is more cumbersome. Election Commission should simplify the manner in which data is shared with the public. That's what maintains transparency. It enables people to look at the data and point out any irregularities which might come up. See, the world's largest democratic election, it can't be 100% foolproof. That can never be the case. There will be some discrepancies. But if Election Commission maintains that transparency, if it is open to constructive criticism, together we can refine the process and set the process right as much as possible. And for that, the data should be given out on time. Sometimes there are unsubstantiated delays even after the elections are over, and Election Commission will fail to share the data on time. So these processes can be fixed. There should be better communication, better sharing of information. So that is something you can discuss and point out how systemic solutions are needed. Reforms are needed. Special intensive revision is necessary, but it should be done right. A special intensive revision should ensure that eligible voters are not removed. Only ineligible voters are filtered out. So discuss the possible reforms, the solutions in the body, and then conclude your answer. The conclusion can again focus on the sanctity of the electoral process, why it is important in a democracy, why the voter should have confidence in the Election Commission, how it is the responsibility of the Election Commission to maintain and build that public confidence. So that should be your conclusion as well. So using this approach, see if you can write an answer and please post your answers in the comment section. And also tell me if the answer writing approach is helpful for you. If you're benefiting from this, please let me know so I can continue this. Maybe we can do it for 2 questions every day so that it really helps improve your answer writing skills. Now let's move on to the next article. On page number 8, there's a column related to industrial safety. A very important topic. The writer here, a former chairman of Indian Oil Corporation, has enormous experience in working in factories and industries of India. He has first-hand experienced the brutal impact of industrial accidents, industrial tragedies that occur. See, every now and then in our country, we come across so many industrial accidents. These are pure man-made disasters. Take, for example, the recent gas leak and blast that took place at a chemical plant in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana. A recent incident at a firecracker factory in Tamil Nadu. There have been multiple boiler explosions and leakage of hazardous chemicals and materials and gases that have taken place across India, from Rajasthan to Bihar to Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu. So every year, multiple such tragedies are occurring in our factories, in our industries, and hundreds of people are getting killed every single year. The price is being paid by the workers, the poor workers in our industries and factories. They are paying the price. If I tell you the data, you'll be shocked. In the last 5 years, 6,500 workers have been killed in our factories and industries because of industrial tragedies that have taken place. And trust me, 99% of these disasters were avoidable. Most experts around the world agree that industrial disasters do not happen by chance. It's not some random accident. It is largely a result of human negligence. It is pure negligence on the part of the industry, on the part of the executives who are running the factory, who are running the organization. It is their negligence, the failure to maintain the equipment, the failure to follow safety standards and protocols, which is resulting in these tragedies. And this is also a failure of the government and the regulators. Because it is the job of the government to guarantee industrial safety as a right to our factory workers. It's the duty of the regulators to carry out regular inspections, enforce the regulations and guidelines strictly, and penalize the violators to prevent such accidents from occurring. Because tragedies in factories and industries do not happen by accident. It's not a matter of chance. It is purely a factor of human negligence, pure negligence by the factories and industries. And who's paying the price? Poor workers, innocent workers are paying the price. Their families are being shattered. 6,500 deaths in 5 years. That's more than 1,000 deaths every year. Every day, 3 workers are getting killed in our country, and nobody is raising a question about this. Whenever a tragedy occurs, it is reported maybe by some newspapers, right? Apart from that, traditional media, the mainstream media, largely ignores these incidents as well. Nobody even bats an eyelid. There is no social media outrage. Nothing happens. Everybody forgets about the incident, and those who are actually liable for these accidents, they are never held accountable. The government, the regulators are not held accountable. The industry executives and the factory owners are not held accountable. And who pays the price? The poor workers and their families. They lose their breadwinner. Children will be orphaned. Entire families will be uprooted. Many times they don't even get adequate compensation. And that is the true tragedy which is occurring when it comes to industrial safety in our country. Now, who doesn't remember the worst industrial disaster the world has ever seen? The Bhopal gas tragedy. Despite this, we haven't learnt our lessons. It's not that we do not have sufficient regulations. India has enough safety standards. There are sufficient laws and regulations. The problem is in enforcement. There is a clear lack of enforcement. The writer points out that after every industrial accident, a committee is set up, some investigation is carried out, and the findings always points towards negligence. The findings into industrial accidents in India, in almost all cases, they show the lack of maintenance. Critical equipment, they are not adequately maintained, meaning the servicing is not done on time. Safety protocols are conveniently violated. Critical spare parts and components are not replaced even after the expiry period. This is the reason why many such tragedies have occurred. See, most of the tragedies are preventable. Today, there is enough technology available to provide early warnings in industrial setting as well to prevent these man-made disasters. As I said, if the safety protocols are followed, if you look at the Factories Act, if you look at the labor laws in the country, and if you look at the regulations on industries in our country, there are sufficient safety standards and protocols, but the problem is they are not strictly enforced. Apparently, there is even a collusion between the regulators, the inspectors, and the factory owners, who often bribe the regulators and inspectors to get their licenses and approvals, and they end up overlooking the violations that are being committed. Most times, industry owners are bypassing the safety standards just to increase the profit margins because they don't want to invest capital to replace the spare parts and components, which might be expensive. They don't want to invest in regular maintenance of the equipment and the safety checks and measures because it will call for fresh investment from their side. So this profit-driven narrative is eventually costing hundreds of lives every year in our country, and nobody is paying the price for it. Nobody is being held accountable except for the workers and their families who are paying the price for it. In other countries, this would never happen. Let me give you the example of Singapore and even South Korea. Do you know in these two countries, which are advanced economies by the way, they have corporate manslaughter laws. They have a dedicated corporate manslaughter law. If such accidents occur in a corporate setting, the company executives, the decision makers who would be responsible for these safety decisions, they will be held criminally accountable. Meaning executives of the company, including the CEO, the entire board, they will all get arrested and they will get a jail term with a hefty penalty. And it ensures a very big compensation as well for the victims, for the workers. So, no wonder industrial safety is of the highest standard in countries like South Korea and Singapore. I'm not saying they're free from accidents. Maybe one or few tragedies might occur, but they can significantly reduce those incidents because there is criminal accountability. Company executives can be arrested and jailed in such incidents. And if there is a clear case of manslaughter which can be established, believe it or not, India has no such provision. Though negligence can be held as criminally liable under existing laws, we do not have a dedicated law for corporate manslaughter. Now, this highlights a class divide as well, which I think is very, very important to observe from a society angle, from a social issue point of view. This represents a class divide as well between the rich and the poor. Now, you tell me, I'll present two cases. You tell me what will happen. Imagine in a large IT company or a tech park, or maybe in a very important government building where ministers, politicians are present, or in large corporate setups where company CEOs and billionaires are working. Imagine an accident takes place, a disaster occurs, and many top executives, politicians, etc. would get injured or killed. What would be the outrage in the media? What would be the social media trend? What would be the response of the government for these incidents? And how does this compare with a boiler explosion in a factory, or a gas leak, or a fire in an industry where several workers might get injured and killed? Will our electronic news channels who have these screaming contests, will they pay same attention to these factory incidents where poor workers are getting killed as much as attention they would give for these incidents on the other side of the spectrum? You tell me honestly, what do you think will happen? Imagine a large tech park or a big corporate setup where billionaires are killed, the top CEO executives get killed because of a fire. What will be the national attention on it, the government's response to it, and for the repeated industrial accidents happening in our factories day to day? 3 Indian workers are getting killed every day. Nobody bats an eyelid. This is the class divide present as well. That is why you need stronger industrial standards, safety standards and protocols, and worker rights. Industrial safety should be guaranteed as a right. It should be enforced. So what you need is strict enforcement. We don't need fresh laws and regulations. They are already there. What we need is strict enforcement, accountability, raising questions when these incidents happen. In a way, Indian citizens are also responsible, right? Because citizens in general, they have a liking for consuming such news which grabs more attention. So media also caters to that audience. But when these genuine cases go unreported, nobody raises a question because nobody is interested in it. So this is the grave tragedy that the writer is highlighting here. And let me tell you why this is so important. Why did I even get a little emotional in the discussion? That's because if India has to rise up as a global power, it can happen only on the foundation of our industrial growth. Just agriculture or services will not do it. Day in, day out, our factory workers are putting in their hard work, their blood and sweat, quite literally. They are risking losing their limbs for industrial accidents, losing their lives. They are the ones who are building the nation. So if you don't protect them, if you don't give them a legal right, enforce the existing rights, how will the nation really develop? So India's eventual growth and development is tied to industrial safety as a right, which has to be guaranteed. Is that clear? So that is why this topic is very important for disaster management, for economy as well. And even under social issues, the class divide can come up as a topic for discussion. How accidents in the corporate world, when it affects the rich and the upper executives, the reaction is different, the response is different, whereas the same occurs for the vulnerable working class, the poor workers, the response is entirely different. showing a clear class divide. So please take up this practice question and using what we have discussed, try to practice your answer writing for this. Now let's look at another important article written by Dr. C. Rangarajan, the former governor of RBI and also the former chairman of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Dr. Rangarajan, based on his incredible experience, is talking about the impact of American tariffs on India. As we have discussed in previous sessions, US has now levied 50% tariffs on India, which happens to be the highest for any trading partner of the United States in the world. Donald Trump, a few days ago, notified 25% tariffs on all Indian exports on the grounds that India has a huge trade surplus. He has called India as a tariff abuser. According to Donald Trump, India has very high tariff and non-tariff barriers, which is basically denying access to the Indian market for America's big corporate companies in agriculture sector, industrial sector, etc. And he calls this as unfair trade policies, which allows India to maintain a huge trade surplus. See, India does have high trade barriers, especially against developed countries. If you look at India-US trade relationship, we do have high tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers denying market access for American companies. But there is a solid reason behind it. India is a developing nation. We can't simply open up our sensitive sectors like agriculture, animal husbandry, and the small micro enterprises. They can't compete with developed economies and the large corporates from the Western world. In terms of pricing, in terms of quality, in terms of technology, they won't be able to compete with them. So to protect some of our sensitive domestic sectors, under the international trade rules of WTO, we are allowed to levy higher tariffs and create some non-tariff barriers to protect our markets and protect our domestic industries, especially the sensitive ones. But Trump's argument is that, his logic is that trade deficit with India is inherently bad and India is solely profiting from it, as if it's some sort of an evil strategy. See, Trump doesn't understand that trade deficits inherently doesn't mean that it's a negative thing. Yes, of course, India does have a big trade surplus of around $42 billion approximately. That's because we do have more exports into the American market. We do have better access, and access to American products into Indian market is slightly restricted. But this does not mean that US will be the net loser in this trade partnership. Of course, US does have some sort of dependency on Indian imports. India has a lot of exports headed towards the American market, but this in a way helps the American consumer to access cheaper goods. The cheaper imports coming from India, they are helping the American consumers to pay a lesser price. If the same goods were to be produced in the US, the cost would be much higher due to the higher raw material cost, the supply chain cost, and the production cost. The labor cost also would be higher in the US. American consumers would be paying much more, leading to even inflationary tendencies. So by relying on markets like India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Philippines, and others, even Mexico and Canada, US consumers are paying lesser price because they're accessing cheaper imports. But of course, Trump's economic logic comes from somewhere else. And he's of the opinion that trade deficits are inherently bad and countries like India should be punished. Though this is defined as the most important partnership of the century, though India and US are supposed to have a strategic partnership and close defense security relations, the US is getting openly hostile against India, resorting to these trade wars. And it's not just the 25% tariffs that have been levied which bothers India. This is something we could have lived with, because US has levied almost similar tariffs against other trade partners as well, in the range of 15 to 25%. But what really bothers India is the additional penalty of 25% which has been levied. This is to target India's oil imports from Russia, as India has bypassed Western sanctions on Russia following the Ukraine war. Of course, because see, India doesn't follow unilateral sanctions. We have an independent foreign policy rooted in the principle of strategic autonomy. We don't follow unilateral sanctions imposed by one country against another or by a group of countries against another. If it was through United Nations, India would be more than willing to follow those sanctions. But unilateral sanctions are usually geopolitical in nature. So India doesn't fall into that bracket. We are not allies of Americans or Russians or Europeans. We look after our own self-interests. That's what every country does in international relations. So India bypasses these unilateral sanctions most of the times. And also Russia is a critical partner, an all-weather friend, a country which has stood with India through thick and thin from 1947 till date. So India can't simply abandon such a critical partner. So in a way, India has taken a balanced position on the Ukraine conflict. We have called upon Russia to end the war while abstaining from any criticism against Russia. And we have even bypassed the sanctions, and India has indeed become one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. Recently, we have overtaken China as well in terms of procurement of Russian oil. Now, America's argument is that somehow India is using American dollars to buy Russian oil, which is not entirely true again. That again shows the lack of economic logic in Trump's administration. See, Trump is being advised by a very questionable expert, Peter Navarro. His credentials are highly questionable. He's seen as the brainchild behind all the tariff wars of President Trump. Peter Navarro's argument is that India is earning dollars from US, using the same dollars to buy Russian oil and funding the war in Ukraine. This again defies logic. We don't even use the US dollars to pay for Russian oil. As Russia is under sanctions, we have been using alternate currencies. We have been trying to work out alternate payment systems. So India has a very sound justification as to why we continue buying Russian oil, why we continue to have good ties with Russia. At the same time, why we want to have good ties with the West. It's a very balanced position. In a way, Americans actually asked India to buy more Russian oil at the start of the war, because otherwise this would have destabilized global oil markets and oil prices. If all of a sudden Russian oil had been taken off the oil markets, prices would have fluctuated and global economy would have been destabilized. So at the start of the war in 2022, US actually behind the scenes urged countries like India to pick up more Russian oil so that the stability in the oil markets could be maintained. Now, the current rivalry, the hostility over Ukraine is between the West and Russia. We don't want to get involved directly in that. But United States levying a penalty of 25% additionally is something that has really affected India, and it poses one of the biggest threat for our independent foreign policy. Because India is being tariffed and punished not just for the trade policies, but even for our foreign policy decisions and strategic foreign policy choices. So this is where we have to understand what could be the impact, the economic impact. Dr. C. Rangarajan is helping us understand the eventual economic impact of these tariffs. So as per calculations by experts, Indian exports will definitely take a hit. We might see up to 25% reduction in our exports into the US market. This is for sure. In the last fiscal, if I'm not wrong, India exported roughly around $86-87 billion worth of goods into American market. So this might drop by 25%, which could affect important sectors like agriculture, pharmaceuticals, textiles, garments, gems and jewelry, leather, furniture, etc. By the way, all these are labor-intensive industries, job-creating industries. So agriculture, MSME sectors, those industries which are labor intensive, they might be the biggest hit. So cumulatively, this might account for a GDP loss of 0.6%. This is quite significant. India's GDP is estimated to grow at around 6.5%. And imagine a reduction of 0.6%. It could bring this down to around 5.9%. See, in today's difficult global economic environment, India's 6% growth was seen as very decent, and India would still be one of the fastest growing economies. But if this growth of India were to be dragged by 0.6%, it would be indeed a significant impact. This will in turn have an impact on our current account deficit. This could spill over like a domino effect, affecting inflation and our currency valuation as well, which in turn could impact our forex reserves, leading to a much wider macroeconomic impact. Though India can absorb the impact, we can live with this. It's not as if Indian economy is going to collapse without American market. India will of course look to diversify the exports. We will also try to negotiate the trade deal, which is currently underway. We still have some time before the tariffs kick in. We will try to somehow appease the US, play to Trump's ego, because eventually he's a narcissistic leader, right? He himself has established that. So India will engage in very clever diplomacy in the coming days to soothe the ego of Trump. Maybe he's furious that we have not acknowledged his role in the so-called ceasefire that he mediated between India and Pakistan. Or maybe he's that desperate for a Nobel Peace Prize and India doesn't acknowledge his role in the ceasefire, right? It could be any of these reasons. But irrespective of that, India will try to figure out a way to negotiate a trade deal to try and normalize these tariffs if possible. So that could cushion the impact to some extent. Apart from that, in the long term, there is one lesson for India. You can't trust the US entirely. You can't rely on America's foreign and trade policies. We need to diversify our exports. We need to find more markets. Instead of having 85, $86 billion worth of exports to US, how about we shift those exports to European market, to Africa, to South America? This is where the trade agreements with Britain, the FTA with EFTA countries in Europe, our recent FTAs with UAE, Australia, they come into picture. And if we can finalize the proposed FTA with European Union that can throw open the European market to India. So India will try to do this in the medium to long term, but in the short term, we will pay the price. If the tariffs take effect, if the trade deal does not go through, there will be a significant impact. You might see a reduction of 0.6% in our GDP, up to 0.6% reduction, and there will be a cascading effect on the economy. So now India is trying to figure out ways to shield ourselves. In the medium to long term, we have to diversify our exports, reduce reliance on the American market while maintaining our independent foreign policy. India has already made this very clear. We will see that in the next article as well, how India is reiterating we are doubling down on our independent foreign policy. But at the same time, we should engage in clever diplomacy with the US, try to work out a mid ground, try to ensure the tariffs are reasonable. Because see, this could purely be a negotiating, blackmailing tactic as well. Trump is known to do that. Trump champions himself as a deal maker, and he's known to use hegemonic tactics like the Big Brother attitude to threaten, coerce, and force others and arm twist and blackmail others into agreeing into deals. So this could be part of the same tactic. Maybe they're not serious about imposing it, but they want to arm twist India, force India to make concessions because they are desperate to create an opening into Indian market, to flood American products into India so that it can benefit the multi-billionaire corporate setup in the US, which happen to be the primary financiers into the Trump campaign, by the way. Right? So now how India will respond, how India will try to shield itself is something that matters. As I said, in the short term, there would be some impact. We have to brace for that. If it takes effect, we should work out the trade deal, try to bring down the tariffs. But in the medium to long term, we have to diversify our exports, find new markets, become more resilient, become more self reliant. That is what is needed in today's unstable and chaotic world order. Now, in a related topic, on the front page, there is an update, very important update. India is doubling down on its strategic autonomy. If Trump is questioning India's foreign policy choices, forcing and blackmailing India to cut ties with Russia, forcing us to follow the sanctions, India's response is very clear that this is not going to happen. The Modi government has made it clear this is not 2018 and this is not Iran. Because back then, the Modi government did make one mistake. During the first presidency of Donald Trump, India did fall under American pressure and we zeroed out oil imports from Iran when Iran was hit with American sanctions. When Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, he brought back crippling sanctions on Iran targeting the nuclear program and the energy and defense sector of Iran. At that point, Iran was one of our largest oil and gas suppliers. A few years ago, Iran was our second largest supplier after Iraq, even more than Saudi Arabia. It was critical for our energy security. We were making big investments as well in India, in Iran's energy sector. But because of Trump's pressure tactics and America's push, the Modi government, for the first time, India had never followed unilateral sanctions till then. For the first time, we moved away from strategic autonomy and independent foreign policy, and we followed the American sanctions and zeroed out oil imports, cut off oil imports completely from Iran. This even compromised our ties with Iran, which is such a crucial strategic partner. So maybe that was a precedent for Trump to target India now with regard to our oil trade with Russia. But this time, the Modi government is not looking to make the same mistake. As soon as Trump announced the 50% tariffs, NSA Ajit Doval carried out a very important visit to Moscow, met with Putin, reiterating the India Russia relationship. And this has been followed by a telephonic conversation between Prime Minister Modi and Putin. In fact, PM Modi tweeted about this as well, reiterating Russia is a critical partner for us. And very soon, Russian President Putin is going to visit India. The dates are being worked out in another few months, maybe. The India Russia summit, which was previously an annual event, it's going to be held in India this time. And Putin is likely to travel and he might visit India. And this at least has been confirmed. The details are being worked out. But the very fact that India is now very serious about hosting Putin, taking forward the India-Russia relationship, it sends a very strong, powerful message to US and the White House that you can't bully everyone. You can't mistreat your friends and partners, right? You can't arm twist and blackmail countries when it comes to international relations. That's a clear message going out from India that India will not take this lying down. So this is something you need to take note of, and we will keep tracking these developments. Of course, it's a developing story. Then coming to another important article, Israel's war cabinet has approved a very controversial plan which has triggered global outrage. Israel's war cabinet has approved a plan for full occupation of Gaza city. The Gaza city is one of the urban neighborhoods in the larger Gaza Strip. And the Israeli war cabinet has approved this highly controversial plan through which IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are going to capture and occupy the entire Gaza city. Israel is saying this action is necessary and justified. Israel's argument is that this is necessary to completely dismantle Hamas, the extremist group, the Palestinian extremist organization, which was responsible for the October 7th attack. And Israel is saying that this is necessary to deliver humanitarian aid to Palestinian civilians who are stranded and who are not able to access humanitarian aid. Israel says by fully occupying Gaza city, it will dismantle Hamas and ensure humanitarian aid is delivered to the Palestinian civilians. And what is the eventual plan after occupation? Eventual plan is to hand over the authority, hand over the administration of Gaza to a new authority, which is not Hamas and neither the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority is the legitimate recognized authority under the Oslo Accords. Israel itself had recognized Palestinian Authority is the legitimate administrative authority of both West Bank and Gaza under the Oslo Accords of 1990s. So now Israel is saying that the future administration of Gaza would be run not by Hamas. Yeah, that is for sure. Hamas is likely to be dismantled by Israel. And they will not hand over the authority to even the recognized Palestinian Authority. Meaning, Israel is looking at some sort of a new administrative setup where Israel itself might play a role. And this would be the future administrative setup in Gaza. That's what Israel is claiming. Now, this plan has raised a huge outcry around the world. Strong opposition has come up around the world. And even within Israel, protests have broken out against these plans of the Netanyahu government. Now, it's important to understand why this outrage, why this protest. See, within Israel, Israeli citizens are protesting because they know that such a plan to fully occupy Gaza will only bring more violence, more bloodshed, and they are more concerned as well about the remaining hostages who are still alive. even the remains of the hostages who were taken by Hamas on October 7th. The families especially, they are building that pressure on Israeli government to talk and negotiate, bring this brutal war to an end, so that the remaining hostages can be saved, and those hostages who are dead, at least their body remains can be brought back to give a respectable funeral. So any such attempt to fully occupy Gaza will only perpetuate the conflict, increase violence and bloodshed. And that's why in Israel there's a lot of protests, because even Israelis to a large extent are fed up with the conflict and they want the safe return of the hostages. But what really matters is the global outcry, the global outrage that we are seeing. See, Israel already stands accused of carrying out a genocide in Gaza. It is facing allegations of genocide at the International Court of Justice. Israel is responsible for the killings of 60,000 Palestinians in the last 2 years, since 2023 October. In response to the October 7th attack, where 1,300 Israelis were killed and taken hostage, Israel has ended up killing 60,000 Palestinians. Now, let's assume a significant number of them were Hamas extremists. Let's assume many of the Palestinians were anti-Israel and they were looking to target Israel as well. Despite that, a large number of those who have been killed in Palestine, a large number of them are innocent civilians who had nothing to do with the terror attack that happened on October 7th. A large number of them who have been killed are children, infants, thousands and thousands of them. This sort of atrocity and humanitarian tragedy cannot be tolerated. No reason, no justification is enough for such a brutal conflict. Gaza has been decimated by Israel. The complete infrastructure has been wiped out almost completely. In fact, so much so that even Israel's close friends and partners are turning against Israel. Take, for example, Germany. Germany has always been a close supporter of Israel, largely driven by the guilt of Second World War, the Holocaust that was carried out by Nazi Germany against the Jews. As a result of that apologetic behavior, Germany was always the biggest supporter of Israel, and it kept on supplying arms and weapons. After United States, Germany has been the biggest arms supplier to Israel. Now even Germany is turning around. Germany has even labeled what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. Not officially, but German officials are speaking behind the scenes. Officials from European Union are also speaking behind the scenes that actions of Israel very much appear to be an act of genocide, an attempt to wipe out Palestinians, an entire community on the lines of religion, race, and ethnicity. So this tragedy is something which is not being overlooked by the global community. The US might be ignoring it, but United Kingdom, France, Germany, and many other key European countries, they are going ahead to give recognition to Palestine, to add more weight for the creation of two-state solution. UK has already said that if Israel does not change its path, UK will go ahead and give recognition to Palestine, something that other European countries have already done. Spain, for example, France, and others have already given that recognition to Palestine. And this gives more weightage to the two-state plan, and it is in line with India's policy as well. India supports the creation of two states. We support the creation of Palestine. India was one of the first countries to even recognize Palestine in 1980s. Now, this plan to occupy Gaza is very, very dangerous, risky, and controversial, because Israel is already known to target humanitarian corridors and the humanitarian aid which is being delivered. See, nobody believes that Israel is looking to occupy Gaza to give humanitarian aid, because IDF have been deliberately targeting humanitarian workers, and those who seek out support like food, medicines, etc., which is life saving. When they seek out humanitarian assistance from the camps, they have been directly targeted. Almost on a daily basis, several Palestinians are being killed, including old people, civilians, and children, when they are seeking out humanitarian aid. So there's no point in Israel's argument. That's why the UN Human Rights Chief, the UN Human Rights Commissioner, has also called for an immediate halt for this deadly plan. Because we have seen what happens when Israel occupies Gaza. We have seen this happen before. There's a history to this. Back in 1967, please make a note, this point is very important. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, the Israel-Arab War, Israel did occupy Gaza. It took Gaza from Egypt and held on to Gaza until 2005, until the rise of Hamas. Until Hamas rose to power by winning the elections in 2005 2006. Israel occupied Gaza, ruled Gaza for more than 4 decades. And what happened during this period? Brutal atrocities, persecution, oppression of Palestinians at the hands of Israeli forces. So Israel stands accused of severe human rights violations when it occupied Gaza from 1967 to 2005. So there is already a template. So you know what might happen if Israel makes another similar attempt. So that is why there is strong opposition coming up, a lot of criticism. All the Arab countries have issued statements condemning Israel's plan to occupy Gaza again. So this is something you need to watch out for. Next, there is another disturbing development. This is from Republic of Ireland. This is an issue that concerns the well-being of the Indian diaspora, the Indian community. And this is an important topic under international relations. See, in the Republic of Ireland, which is an EU member, there is a very strong Indian community. A very strong Indian community of around 90,000 to roughly 1 lakh Indians are present in the Republic of Ireland. Many of them are students. Many of them are Indian workers, professionals, especially engineers, even doctors, nurses, etc. And there is a small section of illegal migrants as well, who have snuck out of India and entered some European countries illegally. So such illegal migrants are also found, who often take up the low-end jobs like taxi drivers and other low-end jobs. But this percentage is very small because a large percentage of the Indian community in Republic of Ireland is comprised of highly educated, high-skilled Indian students and workers who are contributing to the Irish economy. But however, this has triggered racism and xenophobia amongst few sections of the Irish society. See, in general, the Irish people are very friendly, seen as very mild, good mannered. They're quite welcoming of outsiders and diversity. But the economic and social problems in Ireland, which has crept up over the last few years, it has contributed to increasing resentment amongst the youth, especially those who are unemployed, those who are not having lucrative jobs. They look at the performance of outsiders like South Asians in particular. Right? South Asians in general do very well in Europe, particularly Indians. And this resentment of some of the natives has now turned into racism, not just verbal racism, but racist attacks, physical violence, including a clear case of xenophobia. A clear hate for foreigners is developing. So there have been some horrific incidents that have raised concerns. For example, a taxi driver was attacked by a violent group on the basis of color and nationality. A small kid, 6-year-old kid of Indian parents who are working, they're professionals, by the way. And this 6-year-old kid was beaten up by her own friends who abused her on racial lines, asking her to go back to India. A hotel chef was very brutally beaten up and injured in another case of xenophobic attack. These incidents have been rising, and Indian embassy in Dublin has already issued an advisory and warning to the Indian community to be careful about rising incidents of racism and xenophobia. Indian government will take this up very seriously, but before that, the Irish government itself has reacted. See, you can't judge the entire country by the actions of few people. There might be few extremists who might be resorting to such racist attacks, but in general, as I told you, the Irish people are very welcoming. They are, in general, they appreciate multi diversity in their society. The Irish foreign minister has reached out to the Indian community, reassuring them that such attacks will be dealt with. Investigations will happen, the culprits will be held accountable, and the Indian community would be made to feel safe again. So this outreach is very welcome from the Irish government, and India is also engaging with the Republic of Ireland administration to ensure the Indian community is protected. So this is another key development that you need to note down. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's quickly go through the small prelims related topics and then we will close the session for today. On the front page, the Hindu carries an image of this ritual and celebration from coastal Maharashtra, from the Konkan belt. There is a very important celebration, a festival of sorts, which is celebrated in the Konkan coast called Narali Purnima. This festival signifies the start of the fishing season. Please make a note, it's very important. In the Konkan coast, you have a fishing community called the Koli community. The Koli community, it's a distinct caste found across the Indian subcontinent, even in parts of Pakistan, Nepal as well, but primarily concentrated in the Konkan belt of Maharashtra and parts of Gujarat as well, in the coastal belt. And their primary occupation is fishing. They are fishermen per se. They do also practice agriculture, but they are primarily fishermen. During British era, they were basically categorized as a criminal tribe under the Criminal Tribes Act. You know how British would mistreat the tribes of India, uh, and they were listed as a criminal tribe at one point. Post independence, they have been denotified. So it's a denotified community. And post independence, the community primarily engages in fishing. Now, during the monsoon months, I hope you know that there is a ban on fishing. Government of India enforces a ban during the monsoon months, the peak monsoon from June to August, because this is a time for breeding. It allows the marine environment to replenish the fishes, right? Now, the practice of the Koli community of Narali Purnima is so important. It predates independence of India as well. From hundreds of years, the coastal community actually practices a self-imposed ban. From the Ashada month to Shravana month, when the transition happens, first of all, there is adverse weather, right? When monsoon sets in, it's not conducive for fishermen to venture out. And fishermen also know they can't over-exhaust and exploit the fisheries. They should give some time of at least 2 months to allow the marine ecosystem to replenish the fishes. Look at the beauty of this festival. Narali Purnima is not just some tradition. There is a scientific basis to it. It keeps the fishermen safe during the adverse weather in the Arabian Sea. And they take a break so that the fishes can replenish and they will venture out again from the end of August to restart fishing cycle which sustains the coastal fishing communities. This is the economic, cultural significance of Narali Purnima celebrated by the Koli community. They mark this festival by getting ready, they hold a procession as well, and they offer coconuts to the sea as an offering to Lord Varuna, who is considered as a god of the seas and the ocean. This offering is made, an offering of coconuts is made. So please make a note of this cultural practice. There is a solid scientific basis behind this particular religious practice. Next, related to Indian economy. The Union Cabinet has approved a 30,000 crore subsidy for LPG subsidies which are given out. As you know, globally, gas prices are very volatile, especially since COVID-19 and the Ukraine war and crisis in West Asia. Gas supplies have been disrupted. The prices have become very volatile. They're fluctuating. And as you know, cooking gas, LPG, is very critical for the common man. So the poor sections are not able to afford the higher prices. And the oil companies, they take up the higher burden. They are subsidizing your LPG cylinders to some extent. So be it Indian Oil Corporation, BPCL, HPCL, they take that cut. They basically bear that additional cost and they don't allow the higher prices to be passed down to the consumer. We also have a scheme, the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, to promote the usage of LPG cooking fuel, right? To not only to contain pollution and emissions, but also to ensure women empowerment. So under the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, there is free cylinders and subsidies and refills which are also subsidized, which is given out to the eligible beneficiaries. So to account for these losses the companies are incurring, the cabinet has approved a massive sum, 30,000 crore for subsidizing these oil marketing companies and an additional budget of 12,000 crores dedicated for funding the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana. So this again highlights how the government steps in to protect the vulnerable when it comes to key commodities like LPG. The subsidies which are borne by the oil marketing companies is eventually taken over by the government. Government takes over this subsidy burden. So that is something you need to note down. Next, there are two important government schemes in today's newspaper. Right, I've carefully scanned the paper for you today, and there are two important government schemes which can be relevant for your prelims. So make a quick note. Government of India is launching a new scheme called MERITE E. It stands for Multidisciplinary Education and Research Improvement in Technical Education. So it's a scheme focused on improving technical education in the country. MERITE E. This is a central sector scheme, meaning it will be 100% funded by the central government. A budget of 4,200 crores has been assigned to improve the quality of technical education at our polytechnic institutes, at all the technical research institutes in the country. And this project is funded by World Bank as well. 50% of the budget comes from the World Bank. The World Bank is pumping in around 2,100 crores as a loan, as a concessional loan to fund this educational initiative. Rest half of the funding comes from the government of India. A central sector scheme borne entirely by the central government with a loan support from World Bank, and it will be implemented over next 5 years from 2025 to 2030. Over the next 5 years, technical training institutions and research institutions in the country will get additional funds for having better equipment, better trainers and teachers, and to fund even research and innovation. So this will be a big boost for the research and development initiatives as well. PM Modi has posted about the MERITE E scheme, calling it a big win for India's research innovation industry, and it will help improve outcomes in technical training and technical education. So please make a note of the scheme. The features as well can be very important. Another important government scheme in the news is PME Drive. PME Drive, launched a couple of years ago, stands for Prime Minister's Electric Drive Revolution in Innovative Vehicle Enhancement Scheme. As the name itself tells you, it's a scheme designed to incentivize the adoption of electric vehicles in the country to improve electric mobility. So it is implemented by the Department of Heavy Industries, and it provides incentives to the electric vehicle industry for those companies which are setting up the charging infrastructure. For example, they get incentive support through this particular scheme. Then those EV companies rolling out electric buses, electric trucks, electric ambulances, they have been subsidized by giving them e-vouchers for the individual buyers, for the customers as well, to encourage them to buy EVs. Customers are also incentivized, and even the auto manufacturers, they are incentivized as well to roll out electric vehicles into the market. So this scheme was supposed to be implemented for 2 years, and part of the scheme is ending in 2026. But a remaining part of the scheme that focuses on electric trucks, electric buses, and electric ambulances, this initiative will extend. It will be continued for 2 more years until 2028. The support given for individual electric vehicles will stop, like e-bikes, e-cars, that will be stopped in another year by 2026. But the incentives for electric trucks, electric buses, and electric ambulances will continue until 2028. So this is the extension of PME Drive scheme. So with this, I conclude my discussion for today. I hope you guys have understood all the key topics. And if you benefited from the session, please let me know through your comments. Press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.